Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to MACFEST 2024. Today we're saying hello from England, Ireland, and France. And we would like to know where you're sitting in the world, where you're watching us from. So please let us know in the chat. I'm Katarzyna and I'm the member of the MACFEST team. Today we've got a very interesting event. It's part of the Museums and Libraries Festival and part of the International Festival. We've got those themed festival when you look on MACFEST website. So this one is from Dublin. And before I introduce our host today, I'd like to thank you for all your generous donations. We do rely on them to create all these wonderful, interesting events for you. Most of them are free. We still have quite a few coming up before the festival finishes later. So please keep looking on Eventbrite. That's where you can book in for the future events. Stay connected via social media and on the newsletter. And we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. And this event, just like most of our events, is recorded, so you can watch it later again if you wish. Use our hashtag #SpreadHoneyNotHate. So our host for today is Lulieta Halimi. Lulu is part of our MACFEST team. She is a producer at Islam Channel, a teaching assistant, organizer for social events, event manager, stage manager. She is a speaker of many educational events, and she is an amazing TV host. She's just the perfect person to lead, to host this event today. And she had two events with us. She's got two events with us this year. She has created an amazing Albanian heritage event, which you can watch on our YouTube channel or on Facebook page. And there is one more she will be introducing and she will be speaking on it, and it's about wearing a hijab. So please take a look on Eventbrite to find this event. So over to you, Lulu.
Thank you so much, Katarzyna. It's always a pleasure being part of MACFEST. As you mentioned, I'm Lulu, originally from Albania, and I will be your host for today. I'm a TV producer at Islam Channel. I'm a teaching assistant as well and a TV host. It's always a pleasure to be part of MACFEST team and to present this beautiful event that MACFEST is organizing this year. And I can't wait, because I've heard that there is some very, very interesting events coming up for next year. So please, guys, do stay tuned. Today, I will be the host of this event, and without losing any time, I want to say thank you to Dr. Moya Carey, who is joining us today. Very shortly, I will introduce her. She is the curator of Islamic Collection at the Chester Beatty in Dublin. So today we will travel, all of us, virtually in Dublin, where she also was appointed in 2018. In 2022, she curated the exhibition Meeting in Isfahan, Vision and Exchange in Safavid Isfahan, from 2009 to 2018, so almost 9 years. She was the Iran Heritage Foundation curator for the Iranian collections at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Amazing, in London. Her current research address designs relationships between manuscripts and carpets in Safavid Iran and the history of collecting in the 19th and 20th centuries. Her publications include Persian art, collecting the arts of Iran for the Victorian and Albert Museum in London, 2017, and also the co-edited volume with Dr. Margaret Graves for the Journal of Art Historiography 2012 on Islamic art historiography. She received her PhD from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London in 2009. As you've heard, we have an amazing, a brilliant guest today, and I can't wait to discover what she's gonna basically present in our event. Thank you for coming, Dr. Moya, and I'll leave with all my pleasure. I will give you my word.
Oh, thank you so much, Lulu. That's the nicest introduction I've ever had, I think. So thanks a million. I really want to thank Curator and to congratulate Curator Shahraz for her festival. This MACFEST is fantastic. And thank you for inviting me. I'd like to thank also Sarah Mangan, who's the Consul General of Ireland for the North of England, for proposing Chester Beatty to join MACFEST this year. So it's really lovely to be here, and thank you. And thank you, Katarzyna, for all the magic you have made to make this all look so simple and organizing us. I'm just going to go for it and share my screen. 1 second. Can I just confirm that Katarzyna and Lily, you can see my screen?
Yes,
okay.
We can see.
Great stuff. It's not a, yeah, this is always the sort of fun juggling with, I got 2 monitors recently, so it means I disbelieve everything. So I'm just trying to get myself sorted. Right, thank you for inviting me. And without further ado, I will get started and make sure my system is working. So I'm joining you today as the curator for Islamic Collections at Chester Beatty in Dublin in Ireland. And I'll say a little bit more about this museum, about its founder, and about the collections here, especially, of course, the Islamic collections, which are my main focus. Then I'm going to boil it down a little more and go to one of our specific galleries, which is dedicated to sacred traditions. And we are a very broad museum, but I'm responsible for the Islamic collection specifically. So with some wider intro, I'll then sort of go closer and closer, hopefully show you some wonderful things that I think I hope you'll really love. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about what it means to put these objects into the narrative of a primary gallery. What are the limitations and what are the possibilities for putting objects, artworks, works of faith into a display case? What are the limitations of this, and what can we do also on other aspects of the museum and the museum life? So I'm always interested in thinking what else we could do, what we could do next. So I'll be really happy to hear questions and ideas about that when we get to the end of my paper. All right, so who are we? Chester Beatty used to be called Chester Beatty Library, and we rebranded, and we're now just Chester Beatty. We're giving ourselves a sort of an identity as a museum to convey who and what we intend to be. But initially, the earliest references you'll find to this museum will describe it as a library, because of course it is a book collection primarily. And what does Chester Beatty mean? Well, Alfred Chester Beatty, it was the founder. This is the man whose collection accounts for 99% of what's here. He was American. He was born in New York in 1875. He collected throughout his life from about 1910 till his death in 1968. He had a long life of collecting. His wealth was from mining. So he has a sort of a global mining consultancy focused mainly on copper, but on other minerals as well. So his wealth is from ultimately engineering in terms of his business, but his private sort of project was to collect books. And he had Irish roots on both of his parents' side, like many New Yorkers do. He also had English and Scottish connections. A lot of his career was spent in London. A lot of his collection was bought in Paris or Istanbul or Cairo. He lived in Cairo for his winters for a good 25 years of his life. So he's quite international as an individual, but he retired to Ireland in around 1950. And this little sort of clip from the National Broadcaster of Ireland, RTE, is an interview from in the late 60s, basically, where he was talking about what was the intention of his project. He wanted to build a library. I finally decided to build a library. This clip is really worth listening to because he's got the most fantastic Hollywood accent from sort of the 1940s. And I finally decided that when I die, I want to leave it to Ireland. So he made the decision that his private collection would go to a specific country, not one that he'd spent his whole life in, one that he'd moved to, linked with his family background, but it's also a personal decision. He, excuse me, left it to the country. So it went from being a private project to being a national cultural institution. And on his death in 1968, the museum became a museum, truly became a national collection. And that comes with lots of responsibilities, of course, for the host country in terms of care of collection, allowing research, linking with the public properly. And the museum has had, therefore, a relatively short life. We're 50-ish years old at one point, 56 years old, and we have been developing strength on strength since then. So the museum that you would visit today, and I hope you all will, is in Dublin Castle, which is in the dead centre of the city of Dublin. But we used to be in a smaller, more suburban context, which was near where Beatty's home was. So we've changed and we continue to change, basically. And around the year 2000 is when the museum moved to this building, which is where I'm sitting now, which occasionally when it stops raining, that's what the view is like from out the window. So we're more sort of centered to where visitors to the city can find us as well. So we're meeting our public better. So that's just a little bit about who Beatty was, why the museum's where it is, what we're doing in Dublin Castle. But now, so what is the museum? Well, we have over 25,000 objects, and they were made in a sort of wide global stretch from Asia, ultimately from Japan, all the way to Istanbul. Lots of North African material, West African material, East African material. We've got Ethiopian material, as well as ancient Egyptian and Islamic, sort of Islamic world, let's say from Fatimid onwards, in terms of what collections we have from North Africa. The Europe is widely covered in the collections. And I'm saying collections in the plural. There are 3 curators. I'm the curator for Islamic collections, second curators for East Asia, and the third curators for Western collections. But those are sort of where we're sitting now. But I'm giving you a sort of quick, well, I should stop going on about it. I'm trying to give you a quick overview. So, but our main dedication is to the written word. So that could be manuscripts, it could be printed books. The arts of the book are really what we're talking about in terms of the production of books as well as the content of books. There are 2 aspects to every book, which is its materiality and then its textual content. What's a book? It's everything from papyrus, tiny little fragments of books from old copies of the Gospels, for example, parchment, animal skin, paper. Paper is such a diverse material with incredible history that, that one word covers at least 2,000 years. So we're looking at the codex. And when I say codex, I mean like books like all the ones behind me, sort of a book format that we know, but also scrolls, also a concertina format, which is more of a zigzag shape, and then single pages, single folios. And often those are single pages that might have come from a codex format or a concertina format. In terms of content, we're talking about writing primarily. Over 25 languages, possibly over 35 languages are represented in the collection. So writing is a fundamental aspect of all of these objects, and that could be handwritten, manuscript, or print with machines. Illumination and illustration, so images, designs, book bindings. These are all the sort of formats which go together to create a book. We are open. It's a public institution. There are galleries on 2 different floors. So on you come in on the ground floor and there's sort of cafes and shops and lecture theatres, but the upstairs is where the artworks and the collections are on display. The first floor is dedicated to the arts of the book. And I mentioned the 3 curators. If you look at the, does my mouse work actually? I'm just not sure how much I can show you. Are you seeing a mouse moving across the screen, Lulu?
Yes, yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so I can do this and tell you that the Islamic
Yes.
material is here on the first floor galleries. And if you go upstairs to Sacred Traditions on the second floor, and I'll be saying a lot more about this, and you go through the doors, Sacred Traditions are here. But if you wanted to learn about East Asian religious traditions, they're up on the left, and then Christian traditions, Judaism and other traditions are up here. And this is our current layout. There's also a temporary exhibition program. That is something which runs in a third gallery, which you can't see in this picture because it's behind the photographer. And these temporary displays can be, I mean, since I've moved here 5 years ago, the exhibitions have been about 19th century Japan, 17th century Iran. This is the exhibition I did 2 years ago. Early Roman Egypt, or well, late Roman Egypt, but early Christian documents from Roman Egypt. And the exhibition that's just opened yesterday is about French illumination in the 15th century. So there's a really broad range of what you might see in the temporary shows when you come in. We're also we're about research. So there's public access, and then there's research access for people who are focusing on specific aspects of the collections, and they could be art historians or sort of cultural historians of all kinds, looking at materials for sort of academic study or other things. And that is sort of the other half of a museum. One is for access, where you can just come in and see what narrative exhibitions we've put together for you, or your Professor Y or your student X, and you're working with high focus on something very specific, and that's what the reading room is for. I've put links all over this PowerPoint presentation, so they're sort of giving you a sense that our website will give you leads into these different aspects of the collection. We are also all about research in terms of the materiality of the collection. We have a conservation lab with full-time members of staff. Conservators have a scientific background, and they're working on the physical books. And some of these projects are also showcased a little bit on the website, including a major rebind of the Rusbihan Qur'an, which was made in Iran in the mid 16th century, and was a sort of considerable project was needed to restore its binder, to conserve its binding. And there's a little film about that, which I would highly recommend. There's also a longer term project, which is ongoing on a really important early Umayyad Quran, which is, as you can see, a huge text block. And we are, this is something also a much slower, more careful job, but more older, more fragile object, of course. And it's a short video describing the scale of that project, which is again available on our website. And we're online, as you've worked out by now. We have a regular website which points you to the facilities and what's on and stuff, but we also have an image website which we call our viewer, and that's an image database where you can search for things a little randomly, or if you know the exact museum number of what it is you want to study, or you want a particular author, you can go and find the digitized books. We're in the early stages of digitizing all of those 25,000 manuscripts, so we are getting there, moving very slowly through. It takes a lot of care and time to digitize a single book, but we're working gradually through it. So what you will see if you go onto the viewer is some of our wonderful collection, but please bear with us because more is added all the time. And throughout this, throughout my talk, I'm going to talk about this and that, but if there's a link, that means that it's online. So just to give you a little sort of nudge or a wink to know that these are objects that you can go and look up. So for the little diagram on the lower left, which will be right at the end of my talk, you can go and see the full book. You can browse it cover to cover. It's never the same, of course, when you see something online as the same as holding a book. A reading is a very intimate thing and it's very physical because your hands turn pages, your hands hold the book, it's close to you, you can feel it. If it's a really old book, you can probably maybe smell it. So there's a real sort of wonderful materiality to books, which the digital will never replace. However, it is wonderful that you can now access and read through works and see them, because when you go to a museum case, only one page is open, of course, so you have to deal with that selectivity, but there's more to know and more to see, of course. So the Islamic collections that I am lucky enough to be responsible for. There's over 6,000 objects. They are catalogued, some of them by language, some of them by, well, specifically for the Quran, that's a separate catalogue, a separate group of objects, some by region. So India, some aspects of our Indian collections fall under the Islamic Curator, some do not. There are objects, but they're often book related, so pens and pen boxes, but other sort of smaller instruments like an astrolabe and sort of quadrants and a qibla-finder, which is one of my favorite things in this PowerPoint, and I will get to shortly. So the regions that these are from, it's a huge, huge global expanse. And West Asia to Southeast Europe is a big stretch. But I always find that sort of equating Islam with geography in a limitation doesn't actually make a lot of sense, because you can be Muslim anywhere, and people are Muslim everywhere. So this is not a sort of, this geography of the collection relates to where these objects come from and where they were made. And they're complicated zones, of course, with multiple histories of empire of all kinds. They're also multi-faith. The sort of Jewish and Christian and other sort of religious branches are a huge part of the presence of these environments. Look at that stretch. Think about Iraq with its, you know, very sort of complex multi-faith history, many languages. Arabic, Persian, and Turkish are only the beginning of it. Many interconnected literary heritages and scientific traditional discipline. And it's an intersectional global world, global economy anyway. So trade is also joining this world, but also joining with the rest of the world on a sort of a constant basis. So yes, I always sort of resist when things are pigeonholed and to you know, treated as if they're separate. Of course, everything is connected. But these are where these objects were made. And sometimes objects are made and read somewhere else. So objects don't stay still, of course. So that's where things were made. That's how many of them there are, what languages we're talking about, what's in them. Of course, the textual history of intellectual life in West Asia and the Middle East is hugely diverse. It's an immense multiple histories of ideas, of faiths, of laws and science and societies, literature, languages. Even just within languages, there's a whole discipline on grammar and how language works and should work, dictionaries, you name it. This is a really complex and broad textual range in the collection. And then the text is held in a book, and the book has a sort of visual and material reality as well. And that will link with the history of calligraphy. The written word has to be delivered in a material way with ink on a page. So there's a whole physicality to books, which museum curators and conservators especially think about. There's also how else the visual works in a book, with design, with layout, with illumination, which frames the text, with calligraphy, which gives the text voice and shows you something quite important about how the written word, which is of course just marks on a page which convey voice, and what does calligraphy tell us about voice? I think it's interesting to think about, but how illustration, illumination, and design change and sort of enhance what the book is for and what it means to do. So the diagram on the right hand side here, this is from a 15th century Turkish almanac, a calendar book, but this is a diagram which talks about the phases of the moon. And we're used to seeing text in horizontal lines, but of course a diagram is that amazing blitz of, you know, overlaying the graphic and the linear, which is text, and giving us commentary about different aspects in a way that the mind can get in a really sort of immediate and quick way. So graphics are a huge part of how books really work, as well as text, and they enhance your engagement. It's great to think about books as books are primarily ideas, but they're also, the bottom line is they're physical things. They have materiality. The amount of color or gold might tell you more about the status of learning for the object itself, but also of the patron, the person whose book it was. What is a history of makers, of designers and calligraphers, all those incredible skills from paper making up, which go to create any book. And what about the sort of material history of the material of paper and ink and pigments and metals and leather? These are all sort of part of every book. And while, again, back to the difference between the digital and the material, you can see it, of course, with your eyes, but these are all things which have texture and are physical objects to hold. So back to the museum. We're coming in, we're going to go to the Sacred Traditions Gallery. So we're going all the way up to the second floor, the lift or the stairs, and making our way through the from the landing into the central part of the gallery. And this is where I am bringing you. Now, this is quite a small little room. There are 20 objects in it, and I'm sort of aware of time. So I want to bring you now to the objects that I want to say a little more about. So this gallery, as I said, introduces Islam, and this is quite a, I mean, it's a massive, massive subject with so many things and ways that you could talk about it. But the gallery you're looking at now was built about 25 years ago. I'm always thinking about what will happen next with how any gallery is defined. I can see things that I would like to see more of, for example, but it's ultimately quite a small space. But we're beginning with an you know, an introduction to Islam, which is begins, of course, with the Quran, and especially as a book collection. The book is at the heart of this entire concept. And I'm showing you a little bit of a mixture of gallery view with some of the wall texts, but really they're not for, I can't spend too long on them, or I'd have you here all day long, but they're just to give you a framework for how we're presenting this material and trying to bring it to our audiences and to let the objects sing for themselves, which they absolutely do. I should explain another aspect of the physical reality of books, which is that museums place limits to how long a book can be left open in a case. Everything you're looking at here is light sensitive, except for the gold, I suppose. This is a Quran from 15th century Iran. You can't leave them open forever. There are limits which conservation science imposes on us for how low the light must be, how long the book can remain open, and it's 2 years at the very low limit we have here. You always have to let your eyes adjust when you go into a museum, and that light level has a time limit all the same. So we change these displays every 2 years. So what you're looking at now, if you pop over and go to the gallery, it won't be there this time next year, because at the end of this year, we will rotate out everything from this display and put in new manuscripts, which will sort of follow the same narrative. This will still be the central case with an important Quran inside it. So we have like a time limit on how long you can do that. It's also not great for the book bindings to be open all the time. And at the end of the 2-year cycle, when you close the book again, you can almost hear it sighing with relief and to be closed again, and the binding structure sort of can relax again and be put away. So there were these sort of invisible things going on with how long a gallery can be exactly this layout. If we were dealing with another art medium, the time limit wouldn't be there, but it's actually kind of dynamic and good for a museum to have this refresh going on all the time. And it's good for the objects, of course. And this really is a magnificent Quran. It's Juz 3, so a sort of slice of from a 30-volume set, a small section of the text. It is it's relatively large as well when you have it in front of your eyes, and there's so much to be said about any object, and especially one in this case, but you have to stay true to the narrative of the gallery, which is to bring your public to the first thing they need to see at an introduction to Islam is to understand the Quran itself, and to understand that this is an object which is doing a job ultimately, which is to preserve and present an extremely central and important holy text. So my labels are really short. They're always short. There's a painfully short word limit on every manuscript label that you put out, and you're dying to say more, and there's so many more ways you could go. But if you've got a 50-word limit, you have to go straight to super basics, but just super important things. So what I explain here is where in the Quran are we? What's the date? Now, I've said Iran. I haven't gone into the Akoyunli court of Shiraz in Iran because we're just focusing on this as a book, holding this important text. I said it's volume 3 of 30. And then sort of, what does this mean? Some of our audience know precisely what this means and others don't. And you have to speak to all your audiences at one time, which is again part of the acrobatics of trying to explain and share your objects appropriately and enjoyably. So the Quran may be divided in 30 is the message of this. You may follow this division and read one per day throughout the calendar month. So, and then throughout the manuscript, then I get into a little more detail. The calligrapher has done something interesting. So I haven't told you anything about what's on the other pages generally, because when you get close to this opening, you can read that this is the third juz from 30. It brings you straight through. I mean, the Quran layout is so organized and clear and coherent. And this may look like a flash of color. It is a flash of color, but it's also extremely coherent. That beautiful inscription at the top, that tells you which volume it is. It tells you it's from a set of 30. It's all about careful sort of signaling and organization. What is unusual about this type or this sort of formatting is the way the script skips. It skips from a smaller black ink nask to a very sort of jubilant golden thuluth, and then it skips back down to the nask again. So we're going 2, 1, 2. It does that throughout the manuscript. It's quite extraordinary, and that's not, the gold section is not there because it's the surah heading, which you're sort of ready to expect it to be. It's almost as if somebody turned the volume up for this one line, but the text is continuous, and it does this throughout the entire manuscript. And it feels like a demonstration from the calligrapher of his multiple skill in different scales and scripts and media, because you're going from ink to gold. It is a really striking example. I'll just go back one to give you the overview one more time. So there are a few things I can get into my label, and I can say no more. I'm left with so many other things I might have wanted to tell the viewer, but right here in this context, in this gallery, the job is to explain exactly what you can see. And it's never, and this is the sort of where curators sometimes fall down. They want to tell you something else about something else, but you can only talk about what's in front of the eyes of the visitor, and that is what you want them to react to. There are many more Qur'ans in this gallery, and if you were to turn right, having seen your central case, you'll come to their first case is one which has two from very different times, late 19th century Syria, 14th century Cairo, and this extremely earlier version is so from about 900 in Damascus. It's again from a multiple set. It's a single juz volume in an extraordinary script, which is absolutely, it's so elegant. These are so clear. And the Quran's text is the beautiful thing. And it's always the sort of primary element of how manuscripts are laid out. And you can see this in this exact volume. So I'm giving you the final page of this juz, and we only have 3 folios from it, by the way. This is only a fragment of a manuscript, but the final page and the beginning page of any multiple volume set will be a little more decorated, because it's basically giving you, we're at the beginning, we're at the conclusion, and so it sort of holds the book together in the same way that the book binding is decorated and it holds the text together. That's what we're looking at. But the extraordinary simplicity of having 3 lines of text per page is also, it's very luxurious parchment we're talking about here, so absolutely perfect condition skin, and to have a multi-volume set, each with only 3 lines per page, there's a sort of extraordinary level of production there if you're reducing to such a focused aspect. The second manuscript I won't spend too much time on, because as I say, I could talk about this forever, but this is a 14th century Mamluk volume with just the most fantastic ink and the most fantastic paper, incredibly clear, incredibly sort of well marked for all diacritics and vowels. So the sort of primary role of communication and reading is extremely clear. Now, we're used to thinking of Qur'ans as volumes of books, but they do survive in scrolls also. And these 2 are examples of exactly that. And they're in the next case. We've just sort of walked a little bit to our left. These are really well, they're unusual, but there are so many that survive in different museums and libraries that we have to sort of discuss them as an interesting group. A scroll is a little more portable than a volume, indeed, because you can sort of hold it, and it goes in tight. But in this case, there's something very complicated going on with the calligraphy. The scroll is over 11 meters long. It's only about this high, so it's a fat squirrel when you roll it all up, and there are additional prayers embedded at the end and the beginning, and almost sort of echoing into the text itself. And by echoing, can I just sort of show you what's happening here? So that look at how much text we can see. This is a complete copy of the Quran. This is not a single juz by any means. So our surah is coming down here, but look, the calligrapher has left gaps for the sort of, it's almost the sound of a prayer of Allah al-Wahid, which is going down here. And then we continue. Look down here. This is a surah heading in gold. We're going on to the next. I think it's Nisa, begins down there. So there's something very sophisticated going on, which is a world away from the single volume, 3 lines per page, but absolutely something significant to look at. We know the person this was made for, specific official, not a sultan, in Cairo. And we know that this category of script, super small, ghubar means dust, and they are indeed like specks of dust. But when you get close or zoom in, you'll see how good this calligraphy is. It's not messy at all. In fact, it's incredibly sharp. And here is sort of a side view of the same section. And just look at how much voice there is going on here. We have a Quran surahs going down the center. It's also, watch, going along the borders of that little sort of lobe section. It's also going around in quite a large ribbon at the top. And then look here, the next 2 little minor borders, that's more of the Quran. So there are layers and layers. This is really confounding the usual sequence, but the entire text is present. So this is a really extraordinary way to deliver the same sacred text. And I feel like there's a lot more, this is very hard to show in a museum case, because you sort of look into a case and you see something huge is going on, but you can't quite get your head around it. I feel like animation might be the best way to describe it. So the rest, having introduced our visitors to different formats and versions and production times of the Quran itself, we're going to go to sort of other textual traditions connected to it and connected to the 5 pillars of Islam. A section on prayer, on the profession of faith, gives us the one beautiful Quran from North Africa from the 17th century, in which Surah Al-Fatiha is framed and sort of presented as a beautiful sort of isolated little bubble back in the center. The other 2 manuscripts are there, not Qur'ans, but prayer books. So we're separating and explaining to the visitor the difference between salat and dua, that these are different formats with different duties and different requirement levels, but also sort of bring a book tradition with them. And of course, all prayer is ultimately back down to voice again, and these are things which people say rather than read. This late-ish Ottoman manuscript is an extraordinary series of invocations to God, calling him by his beautiful names. You can see how very, very clear it is, and little sort of elements separate each section. Illumination is decoration, but it's also signaling. It's also navigation. It tells you, it separates your little areas of your voiced invocations from the prayer itself, and really signals so much that it's important to credit the design for how much it tells you about how it works, how everything works. This wonderful book is quite little, and it gives us a series of 7 prayers to say on specific days. again, a very simple concept delivered with very little fanfare, but written in gold with our diacritics in a light blue. And it's from Herat in Afghanistan. So it's a Timurid manuscript from the late 15th century. So we begin with Friday. And the illumination that is in play here is simply sort of exquisitely calm, giving us the titles, but then totally silent for the rest of each page. So we have a sort of a trumpet, I suppose, for celebrating Al-Dua Al-Yom Al-Jome, and then we get straight to the prayer itself, which has no illumination whatsoever. We progress through our pillars of faith. For zakat, I had a small Quran from Konya, from 13th century Konya, with the exact sort of textual reference using the word zakat about saying the duty on Muslims is to help the poor. The issue of timely Ramazan fasting, it means this is a calendar requirement for to work into daily life. So I put this little almanac, again, a 17th century one, giving us calendar tables that organizing our and timing fast correctly is one which lives in tandem with other calendar systems. So this is a useful sort of manuscript. This section is about Qibla. So we've covered our 5, and we're now, well, we're getting to Hajj. So that means we're talking about the concept of the Qibla direction. And this is where I get to this lovely object, which is basically a base and a lid. It's about sort of LP size, if you're old enough to remember, or maybe young enough to remember LPs. And it is a qibla finder. It's a universal qibla finder, which was designed and produced by in Istanbul in the 1730s by a man called Pietro Baron, Armenian background probably. He worked as a translator to different European embassies for some countries that don't exist anymore, such as the 2 Sicilies, which is effectively Naples, and England and the Netherlands. He translated works on geography, and he published a book on geography in the 1730s. And this is his little invention. And if we go to the base of the object, I always feel like lifting my hands up because I want sort of people to feel these things as handheld objects. This is for locating you against wherever you are in the world and finding your qibla direction when it's a time for prayer. So there's a world map, well, Eurasia plus first top half of Africa provided. There's a little steel needle. It centers on Mecca, and you will move that dial to point to wherever you are yourself at the moment. And if you can't find your city on the map, you can look it up in the tables below hand. So we are here, and if we look, well, I say we, I'm here. Over in Manchester, you're over here. And you might look this up in the table to find us. And I'm sorry, it's a little bit fuzzy on the right-hand side. Where you see a star, that's where he has the country. So Hibernia, which is, I think, is us in Ireland, and Scotland is, this must be Scotland, Escutia, and there's Denmark is there, but actually I should have looked at our Q&A to see who is where. But you look up your number, for example. So if I was looking up for 14, I would then turn the dial towards 14 and find our location. And by the way, the top has the most beautiful image of the Kaaba shrine in Mecca and its internal buildings and its courtyard. So this is one of many that Pietro Baron made in the 1730s. There's about 12 of them, which Thorolf Hanstein has identified in different museum and library collections in the world. But once you've found your direction of prayer, typically there should be a little chain, 2 chains on either side of this object, so that when you held it open, your beautiful painting of the Kaaba could then form a little mihrab for you eventually and pointing you in the correct direction. You can see there's a compass built in. As you hold your qibla finder, you've got your needle pointed to your location in Manchester or in Dublin, and then you turn the object until you've got true north in the compass, and then you've got it's not a highly scientific qibla direction finder, but it's sort of roughly acceptable. Obviously the earth is curved, so this isn't as simple a matter as a straight line across a flat page, but it's an interesting and rather sort of important little device, because it immediately gives us that sense that Islam looks to the Kaaba, that it's a wide world of where you might be. Even Iceland and I think a little bit of Greenland, these are all areas that are tabled. So that sort of feeling of where you might need to find your direction of prayer is really quite moving. The Hajj pilgrimage, of course, comes with an incredible literary background in terms of production of manuscripts which discuss the fifth pillar of Islam, the visit which everybody must try to make in their lifetime, and the huge sort of significance and familiarity of the sort of beloved buildings and locations that sit at the center of all Muslim life, ultimately, to go directly back to the Kaaba itself. We focus in this case on the three holy cities of Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. And as you know, this is a rotation case, so different manuscripts will come in and come out, and they will be from very, very different places. The manuscript on the left is one that's possibly made in Gujarat, with a sort of question mark over that one. One on the top right is from sort of North Africa or Spain, and the one on the lower right showing us Masjid al-Aqsa is made in the Ottoman world, so probably in Istanbul. So the way these important locations are visualized across a really wide cultural and chronological range is super interesting to me, and I absolutely love this one from 1699, probably Morocco, which is highly stylized and clearly labeled, and a really sort of wonderful and clear diagrammatic way of conveying the central courtyard, the Kaaba at its heart, the Zamzam well, and all of these different spaces inside the sanctuary. I did a little blow up on the bottom right of the Zamzam well itself. We also have manuscripts which go into the case on Sufism, where we talk about this aspect of how to define Sufism. My goodness, it's such a sort of big concept, and this is something which doesn't always have a literature, well, it's just huge literature, but picking something that will be suitable is tricky enough. And this is a painting from the Bustan of Sadi, so a work of poetry which has a sort of ethical and pious dimension. And Sadi's Bustan is full of little episodes. It's not a giant narrative. It's full of little episodes which maybe focus on piety and humility in this particular case, because the short episode is about an old beggar who is standing outside a mosque waiting for the charity of those who come out of it. And the manuscript itself the paintings are probably from Istanbul in the Ottoman court in the 1510s or 20s. And they show us this sort of pious and penniless man at the door with his tasbih in his hand, sort of hoping for kindness to support him. But actually the wider life of a mosque is also here. We have teaching going on inside. We've got individuals with their students. We've got the domed area. We've got our minaret above. And this is really giving us the lived space of the architectural environment, as well as the perspective of the person who's outside, who's hoping for kindness ultimately. I'm going on too long, so I can't say too much about this fantastic gigantic manuscript, which is a hadith compilation gathered by Ibn al-Athir. And this particular manuscript from 1430s Shiraz is an incredible document. we moved to, I think I'm probably going to have to wrap up, I realize, because it's 10 to 3, sorry, where we're looking at this.
No worries, Dr. Moya.
I'm so
You take your
sorry.
time.
This always happens. I get excited and then I
No,
keep going on and on.
there's nothing to say sorry. I'm
Okay.
really enjoying so much, and I'm sure everyone, maybe you haven't seen the comments, but everyone is enjoying so much. It's
Oh,
like having a virtual journey to the library, to the museum, sorry.
perfect. Oh, thank you.
And because it's so interesting, is like personally, me, I learned a lot.
Oh,
So take your time. Don't worry about it.
oh,
We have
thank you.
plenty of time.
Great. Thanks a million. Okay, I will carry on. So we've covered sort of introductory aspects of sort of Islamic faith and duty and texts and the specific ways that they can show us aspects that we know or maybe surprise us with slightly different formats, like the scrolls versus the codex versus a single Quranic text or a single juz from a big set of 30. But we're getting into slightly more diverse aspects here, which is to talk about the prophets of Islam. And we're looking at a long sequence from Adam up to the prophet. And one of those prophets is, of course, Solomon, who is a king prophet. And this is a subject, Solomon and Bilqis, who are, I describe them as a power couple, who are important, very important in the Quran text itself, but they also have a narrative life in Persian and other literatures where their relationship to one another and their significance is something which many poets have expanded on. But a very typical aspect, specifically of 16th century Shiraz, is to begin books of Persian literature with a double frontispiece of that royal prophet, sacred couple. And this is a really good example of that sort of double frontispiece. A frontispiece is just a full page design at the beginning of a manuscript. A double frontispiece is when it's a facing page. So Solomon and Bilqis are shown here. I'm giving you my label text again. You know I have a short word limit to convey so much. But I talk about literary tradition investigating these two noble rulers and their wisdom and spirituality, and of course their connection to the supernatural. Solomon hears the ants speaking in the Quran, he has this sort of all-wise connection with nature and supernature, the supernatural. And this is sort of part of the way they tend to be depicted, where not just the Solomon and Bilqis together as a couple, but also just their entourage is more than just humans. It's also creatures, it's birds and animals and insects and angels and jinn, and they have this sort of visuality which is really multiple, and it should show us the whole universe. I hunted through this painting, which is quite small and full of tiny little creatures, looking for the hoopoe, the hudhud, who brings the message, who brings communication between the king and his queen. And this, he might be him at the very top of Solomon's throne. He's almost got the little comb, so I'm not 100% sure. But the diversity of the natural world is the sort of great subject here, with the royal couple centered in it and all of their surrounding obedient people and creatures, and as I say, angels as well as devils, jinn. And the angels are like royal servants. I mean, here they've got a tambourine, they're bringing in a peacock, who I suspect might be for lunch, and they are the sort of servants to all the creatures here are servants to the prophet and his queen. So they're shown together. And finally come to the prophet himself, of course. And this is one of the most, these are some of my favorite things in the whole collection, actually. There's a lot of literature in praise of the prophet himself, discussions of his merit and quotations of his words, which are the basis of law. And one of the kindest of them is the Hilya, which is a category of description. There's more than one text. There are multiple accounts. And these are, well, as my label says, descriptions of his personal appearance and his manner, which were recorded by friends and family and, of course, preserved ever since. And from the early 17th century, these descriptions took on almost a new life because calligraphers began to present them as a little sort of capsule of text. But it's important to see beyond just the presentation, to look at the content of this text, because the Hillier tradition describes exactly what he looked like, but also how he walked and how he smiled, and what happened, what his voice was like. It's the sort of description that you give of somebody you know very, very well and that you love. And these are really one of the most touching texts that you can read from of somebody of such incredible importance. But it's so genuine and reads so beautifully. I would highly recommend reading, I'm sure you know them already, but this is a gorgeous verbal tradition which has been committed to writing and then has been sort of preserved and promoted through calligraphy. I should go a bit closer, sorry. As I say, the celebration of the Hillier text is very sort of solidly an Ottoman tradition from the 17th century on. And the way it's laid out here, the disc with the text inside, the Prophet's sort of names and his 4 successors, their presentation in the corners, this is a very Ottoman calligraphic text. But the context of text itself about him is, as I say, there are multiple types of it, and we have many in the collection, and I always try to get one of them into this case because it gives us that link with the person, and the sort of the kindness of it actually I think is marvelous and incredibly touching. So I would recommend that, because that is, when you focus on a specific person, what happens in any faith tradition, that they acquire this incredible meaning and value, but also thinking about them is a pious act as well. So there's something really sort of beautiful about this. The second manuscript in this case is about the tradition of the Prophet's footprint and his sandals in particular. And as you can see, this was a text that was composed almost exactly 400 years ago. And the discussion is a compilation of accounts of places where the Prophet is said to have walked, places where he is said to have left a footprint or just been. And we're back to the sort of physical space occupied by somebody very, very important. And then the value of memory of that is left behind. And Macquarie's text became extremely successful from the 17th century on. There are multiple copies of it in different places. And the images that they tend to have, if any, are the footprint. And they give us this sort of diagrammatic rendering of the print of a sandal, or even just the layout of a sandal. I mean, the 2 dots are sort of where the leather straps might attach, but they're about sort of the memory of a space that has been occupied by something else. They're extremely interesting, I think. And this is where the book kind of becomes an echo of something sort of physical and human, of people walking and sort of and then going and having passed away, and all that's left is the memory of where they were. So I find this a really strong graphic way of bringing the concept of a single person, where they were ultimately, and how much value that brings. Macquarie he's the compiler and the composer of that text, so he's sort of both author and editor in a sense. But it's a text that we have a few copies of it here, but there are many university and museum libraries have collections of it, and I think it's still in print. So it is now 3 o'clock. And I want to say thank you so much for bearing with me. I think I said I'd be only half an hour, and now I've just gone and doubled it. So I hope that's okay. And thank you for your patience on a lovely Saturday.
Thank you, Dr. Moya. I don't know where to start. Literally, I really wanted to stop you while you were while your presentation to have a comment or to make a question, but I just didn't want it to interrupt you. It's amazing the fact that, first of all, I want to say in the first slide, I really like the rainbow. It was very nice from you choosing that picture. And it's like, when I think about it, like 6,000 collections, like, yeah. Wow. And all of them in different languages, which makes it more interesting. And when it comes to the Quran, what I would say is, especially because Quran is like a very special book for us as Muslim, is like a miracle that exists in nowadays. And the connection that a Muslim have with Quran is very, very special. And when I approach old Qurans that, for example, my grandparents or my friends' grandparents have been saving, it's I don't know, I would say Quran is Quran, but I would say it's like a very special connection that you want to, like, you touch the paper and you see all the person who wrote it, the calligraphy is slightly different, and it's like it includes a history itself, not only the Quran and the words that Allah has basically written in there. So it's very special to know the fact that in this museum people can find these old Qurans, and they can just go through all the calligraphy and the design and the colors, and then they can read it. It's like amazing. Literally, I find it very, very interesting, and I'm sure maybe the connection that they get in this particular things is more special. And yeah, definitely, definitely. We really had like a virtual journey in the museum, so it makes it very, very important. I do have some questions, but I would like to go through the all our people that has joined. If you want, I can read the comments, but all of them are like, I love it, it's so interesting. Everyone learned a lot today, I'm sure about it. I think I saw a question in the end.
I can go back to any picture if you want to see anything again. Just ask. I'd be delighted. So
yes,
we can rewind to anything.
Zizi is messaging and is saying that Dr. Carey, what are your actual favorite objects in CB?
Oh, that's not fair. There are so many. There's so many. I mean, I just feel lucky every day, basically, with a collection like this. It's just magnificent. I think the best moments are moments like this when I get to show people what's here, and it's really, it's what these objects are for. Is for sharing and showing to people. I love the Prophet's footprint outline. That's just manuscript. I just think is wonderful. And the more I look at this qibla-finder, the more brilliant I think it is. What I didn't have time to say was that the world map at the top, that's actually a print. It's not hand drawn, and that author had produced a geography, and he got the image almost certainly came from Ibrahim Mutafarrika, which is it's the first Muslim-owned printing press with movable type in the Islamic world. So it's got a huge sort of little, it's this interesting little device has a position in the history of printing in the Ottoman world or the wider Islamic world. So there are objects where the more time I spend with them, the more I see, and I just find that really exciting. But again, the best bits are when I get to show people what's here.
That's amazing. And you can actually see the joy and how fascinated they may be when they see this kind of objects. I really liked the scroll, like literally even in the comments when I was reading, people were saying that, and actually it's true, we think for the Quran as a book, but in fact, originally when Quran came, it was written in papers, it was written in wood pieces, so it was not actually a book in the beginning, and it's amazing. We are going through so here it was amazing.
Very strange object, really interesting.
To think that the whole Quran is in there, and what was more fascinating was the gaps that you mentioned as well.
Yeah. They're like sort of ghost words.
Amazing.
And I would really recommend going and looking at this online to get the full sweep of it, because it goes on, and it's a magnificent object. It's very hard to see this stuff. I mean, it's all there. The complete text is there, and then there are these extra prayers at the beginning and at the end. So it's it's the Quran with plus with a few extra things on top of it. But yes, I just feel of the Quran as a book. It's the book. But the historic record shows us that there were other ways of doing a book.
Yeah,
ultimately.
definitely. And it's not, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's not only about the words of the Quran, but also the design, the way how, for example, someone wants to read the Quran as a book, someone wants to see it in a different way. It gives you a different excitement, I would say, a very different
Yes.
excitement. And what
I'll go
is
back through
more,
this one.
the qibla-finder as well was so interesting, especially the fact that you can choose your location and
Yeah.
find your city, which makes it more interesting, especially like if I would have kids like playing with them and showing
Yeah.
them how to find their city and how
Yes.
nowadays it's just you go to the app, you just click and
Exactly.
everything is so easy. But finding your city and trying it makes it so much enjoyable, I would say.
Oh, I think so. And that's a really important part of going to museum, that if you're not activated, it can be kind of draining. Whereas things that just activate your mind and are kind of exciting, the stuff that you need to find and see and do, that's so much kind of the human brain likes to be engaged. And that
Yeah,
it's I think, yeah, we should maybe make a version of it for children so that they can handle it and do it themselves. And Qibla determination is, it's so complex
yeah,
scientifically. It is such a important and interesting mathematical question, especially, because the Earth curves. And then,
yeah,
so the calculations are very sophisticated. So the Qibla finder is not like 100% accurate, as I say, but it's still the principle. And there's the concept of understanding where you are on the map and what's at the heart of it. And that is where the dial kind of, it just shows you. But we should get a 3D printed version of it and let people try it. I think it'll be
yeah.
really fun.
That would be very interesting. And while you were explaining, I was thinking, how did they thought about it? Like it was in all the times, there was always a way. Like people, they
Yes.
were always thinking of different ways, and it's fascinating. Like literally, is very very amazing. And also when you explain the fact of the history and the mosque that you showed, the gifts that they were making, the calligraphers were making to sultans, the way
Yes.
how they tell their story, including the history, architecture, culture, is like amazing. And the color is very colorful as well at the same
Yes,
time.
it is. It's really bright. And the sort of design shows you so much about context.
Yeah,
Obviously, the Quran manuscript history is so diverse, and yet it's so simple. It's all the Quran. It's all got the same like major value that never changes, and yet everything around the words or just the calligraphic style, so diverse. It's so it's really inspiring just how diverse that can be and how much you can see about how this sort of central text is being presented. It's incredibly, yes, it's the richness of it is really amazing. The earlier Qur'ans, let me go, sorry, I'm not to make everybody dizzy, but these are
yeah,
wonderful. They're
yeah,
absolutely wonderful. And they're
yeah.
so simple and yet they're so sophisticated. The script is so clear.
Yeah,
And
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 as you mentioned, so luxury at the same time. Three
yes,
lines per
3
page
lines per page.
is, yeah,
Gosh,
how amazing. It shows
that's a
also the value of the book, right?
yes, it does. It absolutely. There's no doubt that the 3 lines per page, and so much. Look how much clear parchment there is there.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, that's
huge, and
amazing.
it's really is amazing. But it focuses your eye. It just brings you into the central thing, and the most important part is the word, and that is something which these manuscripts express so beautifully. And generally,
Definitely.
job number one is the text, and then but everything else is about framing the text and getting that right. And I love how different calligraphers think of them as designers as well as writers, that they know how to do the job and how to make the message. And look at this.
Definitely.
It's fantastic.
Definitely. It's fantastic. We have another question, Dr. Moya. How can I watch more of your presentation and talks online?
Well, thank you. I don't think I have any about Quranic material online, but I would really recommend my colleagues' videos in Conservation Lab here, where they work on the Rusbihan one and the Umayyad Quran ones. Those are gorgeous to watch. They're very short, And they're really about their work of protecting and conserving these manuscripts. And it also brings you and the camera in super close to the books themselves. So you get that feel for texture.
Yeah.
And the responsibility that conservation staff have, where they're the ones who are
Yeah.
slowly taking care of these manuscripts. I have so much respect for them. Yeah, watch their videos so much.
Definitely. And for everyone who joined late or who wants to see this video again and the presentation of Dr. Moya, they can just log in our Facebook page, MACFEST 2024, and the video will be posted there. They can re-see it. They can share it with their friends as well. They can, of course, stop, see the picture, try to see it again. So you can do whatever you want with the video, which is posted on our website. Well, I have a question, Dr. Moya.
Of course.
I would like to know how has your work at the museum influenced your personal perspective on Islamic art and culture? Because I'm sure during the time you as well have shaped something.
Yeah, very much. And as I say, I feel lucky every day when I get to work with material like this. And it's so broad, it's so rich that is really incredibly inspiring, just how complex the sort of civilizational ranges that we're talking about, the diversity of even just looking at books, which is just one aspect of life, of course, but seeing the rich, there's a very sort of strong legal tradition in Islam, which is largely sort of expressed or retained in a book tradition. This is something which this collection is really strong on. So the richness of the intellectual conversation in Islamic tradition is very, very inspiring. The centrality of biography in Islamic tradition, I also find really impressive. That sort of, 1400 years of careful transmission of text, which is just the discipline of it is fantastic. The history, I mean, a lot of the books that we see, of course, they're very beautiful. They've got gold and so on. And sometimes they're made for princes, and sometimes they're made for institutions, for libraries. So sometimes it feels like a very private passion, and other times it's for the public. A big book is for a madrasa. So there's this sort of sense of community. But I'd say what I find almost the most inspiring is when later readers write in the margins and they react to the book. I don't see that in Qur'ans. I'm thinking about other things. But we had a wonderful scholar visiting here last year, Gareth Davison, looking at Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, and just generally looking at Hadith traditions. And his work was about Sama'at. And so those little notes that are in the corners of maybe like every few pages saying, I read this to be listened to by, I was sitting in this mosque or this home or this place. I read these traditions to the following people, and they'll give you maybe the date and the time and the place. And just that feeling of not just about making books, but about reading books. That basically you're in a sort of long history where the physical book in your hand has existed for maybe 1,000 years. But before you, 1,000 years worth of other people opened it and read it, and then hopefully will continue to in the future. So that sense that the book has been held by many people is that's one of my favorite aspects of book history, which is the community that writes, explains that they're part of this book and to who these books are so important. So that's something that I think goes beyond time.
Definitely.
A book is a physical thing, but it's still a time traveler because it's been through all these readers, and we will come and go, but the different people and what it means to them, one generation at a time, that is something that really I hold very dear, and I love to think about it.
Yeah, literally when you were speaking, I was having like goosebumps when I think, as you mentioned, when you think that this book was held by X and Z, and they went through it as well. As I mentioned, it makes all of your journey more exciting. You feel more excited. You feel more. It gives you a special feeling. It's not only about the book and reading the book, but it's also about like holding it in yourself and in your hands. And as you mentioned, going through the pages, smelling the pages, it gives you a special connection, I guess, because it's physical in your hands. Thanks God for having the digital area, because that brings the book in our houses, so we don't need to
Yes.
go there, especially for people who find it difficult to go and visit it. But for the ones who are lucky enough to touch it and to hold it in the hands, like you, for example, and because you are working there, but also for the visitors, it's amazing. It's amazing connection that you feel with the book.
It's such a privilege. It's such a privilege. And we are in a very digital age with all of the amazing advantages and connections that bring. So everything is changing, of course, and for the physical books are still at the heart of that. And I think but you know, I feel so lucky, basically.
Definitely, you have to feel lucky.
It never gets tired.
I always ask my guests, even when I'm presenting on TV, about the future goals or visions. So I would love to know what are your future goals and visions for the Islamic collection at the Chester Beatty?
Well, there's so much that I would love to be able to do and will take me forever, but there's
maybe any secret that we may know.
Well, my ambitions are sort of all over the place, but I would love to get more connections with Muslim communities in Ireland. I would absolutely love us to have more to do about that. I think when you go to a gallery, you know, with such a big subject, and you have these, so just your 10 cases, your 15 cases, it's so much to show, and everything you're showing is of course old because it's a museum, but you need to sort of think about this as a living tradition in terms of what this means to people. And I would love to get more of a feel of that in the gallery. I think when also because we all live among each other too, so when you have Islam over here and Christianity over there and Judaism over there and so on, you just, you know, cities are full of everyone living together. So I would like to get more of a feel of that we're, you know, that we're all in this world together. So while that would sort of, you obviously have to focus if you're discussing a specific sacred tradition, but I would like to get just a little bit of a feel of community and together, you know, solidarity between, you know, different groups and communities somehow. I don't like putting people into museum cases. I find that sort of a bit wrong because religion is alive. So these are here as artifacts to talk to people, to the wider world, to show heritage and to make connections, to make us think and to realize how long a lot of these traditions are. So it's something to be done, you know, gently and warmly, I think, when you start to involve your communities. But it would be, I'd like to, you know, redesign the gallery a little bit and just have a bit more life in there.
That would be amazing, and I'm sure you will achieve that. I'm sure about it. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
For everyone, Dr. Moya, who wants to come and visit, what are the opening hours? Just to mention, they can also find this online.
Yes,
but you can mention that.
Yes, of course. We open at 9:45. We're open every day. I think we're open until 5:30, I think, each day. During the winter, we're closed on Mondays because that's when we are changing our galleries. So if you're coming from November onwards, we'll be closed on Mondays. Otherwise, we're open every day. It's free. There's no charges for the special exhibitions. It's all free. So you're very welcome to come. And yeah, please let me know.
That's amazing. I think I went through all the questions. I don't know if I forgot any question, but yeah, Dr. Moya, I'm looking forward to come and visit as well and meet you in person.
Please do.
Your presentation was so fascinating and it was so interesting, and it made me, of course, I learned a lot, but it made me want even more to see, to touch the books, to smell them, and yeah, to feel that connection that I mentioned as well.
Wow.
Thank you so much for the beautiful presentation that you did.
My pleasure.
I will repeat myself again for everyone who wants to see it and who missed the beginning of it or the middle or whatever. You just go on our official website, YouTube, Facebook, and you can rewatch it and you can share it with your friends as well. I just want to mention very quickly before I go to Katarzyna, my next event. Please do join my next event. It's going to be, I guess, the last event in July 27th. How to wear your faith with confidence is a very interesting topic, and we will have very interesting guests as well. And I won't take too much time because I'm sure everyone wants to it's Saturday, so maybe they are having plans and they want to go out and enjoy some time with their friends. But again, Dr. Moya, thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be the host for today and to have this amazing conversation with you. And I hope I can see you and meet you. Looking forward to.
Please come and visit, Lulu, and thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Katarzyna?
Thank you.
Thank you, Lulu. Before Katarzyna says anything, thank you, Dr. Moya. That was absolutely incredible session. To be honest with you,
Ezra, you're muted.
oh, sorry, I'm blown over by the breadth, the depth, and what you've covered. And it's thanks to Sarah, who's here with us, the General Council of Ireland, who recommended this museum, and we said yes, why not, we'll host them. And you know what, it's gone beyond our expectation. Absolutely brilliant. And really, we've had many sessions, but this is one of the best. So incredible. Thank you so much. And Lulu, you too, an amazing wonderful host as always. You bring your own aspect to the whole session, and I'm so glad to host you again. And thank you to Katarzyna, who's gonna tell us about the future events. Thank you so much. And Tom in the background.
I would say something. Thank you, Kaisra, as well, for making it happen.
Yes.
It's you who bring all of us together. So thank you for the beautiful invention, I would say, for bringing MACFEST to the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaisra. Thank you, Lulu, and thank you, Dr. Moya. This was fantastic. I was watching and I was thinking to myself, gosh, we've got those MACFEST heritage tours. Perhaps one day we're gonna have an organized tour to Dublin. That would be fantastic. You know, if there is anybody in the audience interested, stay in touch, keep in touch, because it might be that one day it's gonna be advertised. That would be great. So, before we go away today, I just would like to mention the upcoming events. Tomorrow, we've got a photography event. It's part of the International Festival. It's with two photographers that collaborate, and they are twins. It's going to be absolutely amazing. And the host will be another person from the Islam channel, Aicha. And then next weekend, we've got Islamophobia and Muslims in the Media with Dr. Miriam Francois. It's going to be a really exciting panel. Perhaps some of you have seen about a month ago, Miriam Francois on TV. And then we've got Islam and Caring for the Natural World. That's next Sunday. So please do join us. And remember, we've got Lulu's event also coming up in July. So thank you so much for today, and hopefully see all of you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.